The drawing room of Hartley House shimmered with warmth and splendor, a brilliant contrast to the cold autumn rain, tracing delicate rivulets down the tall window panes. Inside, London's most elite mingled beneath the blaze of crystal chandeliers, their jewels catching the light like scattered stars. Silver gleamed on every table, and laughter floated through the room, blending with the soft murmur of conversation and the musical chime of champagne flutes being raised in endless toasts. Marcus Elwood, Duke of Blackridge, stood near the marble fireplace, one hand resting casually on the mantelpiece as he surveyed the assembled company with barely concealed boredom. At 30 years of age, he possessed the dark, good looks and commanding presence that made matrons scheme and their daughters blush. Black hair swept back from a strong-featured face, intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing, and the bearing of a man accustomed to deference. His evening dress was impeccable, as befitted his rank. Though he wore his ducal authority with an ease that suggested he considered it more burden than blessing. "Your Grace appears to be contemplating escape," came a familiar voice at his elbow, warm with amusement. Marcus turned to find Lady Cecilia Montford regarding him with eyes that sparkled with mischief. She was dressed in a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her dark hair and eyes remarkably well, though he noted with approval that she eschewed the excessive frills favoured by most young ladies of the ton. There was an elegance to Cecilia's appearance that spoke of refinement rather than ostentation, her only jewellery a simple strand of pearls that had belonged to her grandmother. "Lady Cecilia," he said, his expression softening into genuine pleasure, "how perspicacious of you. I was indeed calculating whether I might manage a graceful exit without offending our hosts." "Impossible, I'm afraid," she replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing footman. "Lady Hartley has positioned herself strategically near the entrance, rather like a particularly determined sentinel. You would never make it past her." Marcus laughed, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle he employed in most social situations. "Then I suppose I must resign myself to an evening of tedious conversation about the weather, the latest scandals, and the lamentable state of modern society." "How dreadfully pessimistic, Your Grace. Surely the evening need not be entirely lost." Cecilia raised one dark eyebrow in challenge. "I, for instance, have several opinions on the proposed Factory Act amendments that I am quite eager to debate." "Ah, politics at a dinner party. How refreshingly inappropriate." Marcus felt his spirits lift considerably. This was precisely what he valued about Cecilia's company, her complete disregard for the vapid conversations expected of young ladies. "Very well, Lady Cecilia. Enlighten me. What are your thoughts on limiting working hours for women and children?" "That it is both morally imperative and economically sensible," Cecilia began, her eyes brightening with the passion of conviction. "The current conditions in our factories are utterly disgraceful. Children of 7 and 8 years working 14 hours a day in dangerous conditions. It is unconscionable, Your Grace. Any civilized society should not interfere with the natural order of commerce," Marcus interrupted smoothly, deliberately taking the contrary position because he knew it would provoke an entertaining response. "If factory owners are forced to limit working hours, production will decrease, prices will rise, and ultimately, everyone suffers." Cecilia's cheeks flushed with indignation, making her eyes flash magnificently. "The natural order of commerce? What utter nonsense! There is nothing natural about children losing fingers in machinery or developing lung diseases from textile dust. Your Grace speaks as though profit margins are more sacred than human life. I speak as someone who understands that sentiment, however noble, cannot feed hungry families," Marcus countered, thoroughly enjoying himself now. Around them, several guests had paused their own conversations to observe this exchange, with expressions ranging from scandalous delight to pearl-clutching horror. "If factories close or reduce their operations, those same children you wish to protect will starve in the streets. They are already starving." Cecilia's voice had risen slightly, drawing more attention. "The wages paid are so pittance that entire families live in squalor, despite working themselves to death. The answer is not to continue this barbaric exploitation, but to ensure fair wages and humane conditions, so that adults can earn enough to support their children without forcing them into dangerous labor. And you believe factory owners will simply accept reduced profits out of the goodness of their hearts?" Marcus was aware that his enjoyment of this debate was perhaps unseemly, but Cecilia's passionate conviction was utterly captivating. Most young ladies of his acquaintance would have wilted under his opposition. Cecilia seemed only to grow more animated. "I believe Parliament can and should compel them to do so through legislation," Cecilia declared firmly. "That is precisely the purpose of government, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The weak and vulnerable deserve our protection, not our exploitation." "How charmingly idealistic," Marcus smiled, deliberately condescending in his tone, because he knew it would incite her further. "You speak as though the world operates on principles of fairness and compassion rather than competition and survival. I speak as someone who believes we are capable of being better than our basest instincts." Cecilia set down her champagne glass with more force than strictly necessary. "Just because cruelty and exploitation exist does not mean we must accept them as inevitable. We have the power to choose justice over profit, compassion over cruelty. That you refuse to see this, Your Grace, suggests a rather disturbing lack of moral imagination." Several nearby guests gasped audibly at this direct criticism of a duke. Marcus felt a surge of admiration, and something else he did not care to examine too closely, at her fearlessness. Cecilia never tempered her words or her convictions, even when speaking to someone of his rank and influence. "Moral imagination," he repeated, his smile widening. "My dear Lady Cecilia, you wound me. I assure you my imagination is perfectly functional. I simply prefer to ground my opinions in reality rather than idealistic fantasy." "Your reality is the comfortable reality of privilege," Cecilia shot back, her dark eyes blazing. "When one has never known hunger or desperation, it is remarkably easy to dismiss the suffering of those who have. I suggest, Your Grace, that before you speak so dismissively of protecting vulnerable children, you actually visit one of these factories and witness the conditions for yourself. And I suggest, Lady Cecilia, that before you advocate for legislation that could destroy entire industries and throw thousands out of work, you consider the unintended consequences of well-meaning but naive intervention." They stood facing each other, both breathing rather more quickly than the conversation warranted, the air between them crackling with intellectual and, though neither would have acknowledged it, emotional energy. Marcus was acutely aware that every eye in the drawing room was now fixed upon them, that their hostess was making agitated movements suggestive of imminent intervention, and that he should probably diffuse this situation before scandal erupted. Instead, overcome by a reckless impulse born of champagne and genuine affection for this maddening woman, Marcus laughed aloud and declared in a voice that carried across the suddenly silent room, "Only you would dare speak to me thus, Lady Cecilia. This is precisely why you would make an excellent wife for me. Someone to challenge my thinking and keep me honest. What say you? Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air, shocking in their unexpectedness. Marcus had meant them as a jest, a way to acknowledge both their spirited debate and the absurdity of their public disagreement. But even as the words left his lips, he recognized his mistake. Cecilia's expression transformed instantly. The fierce debater disappeared, replaced by a woman whose eyes suddenly shone with joy and disbelief. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers trembling against her pearls. She faltered, then smiled with such radiant happiness that Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I thought you would never ask, finally." The drawing room erupted into chaos. Lady Hartley shrieked with delight. Several young ladies burst into tears, whether of joy or disappointment, Marcus could not determine. Cecilia's father, the Earl of Montfort, a distinguished gentleman with silver threading through his dark hair, surged forward from across the room, his weathered face breaking into an enormous smile. "Your Grace." Lord Montfort clasped Marcus's hand in both of his own, pumping it vigorously. "I had hoped, but I dared not presume. This is wonderful news, absolutely wonderful. Cecilia, my dear girl, I am delighted." Marcus opened his mouth to explain, to clarify that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, but the words would not come. How could he, before this assembly of society's most prominent members, announce that his proposal had been merely a joke? How could he humiliate Cecilia so publicly, revealing that her joyful acceptance was based on a cruel misunderstanding? Cecilia had moved to her father's side, her face still glowing with happiness. She glanced at Marcus, and in her eyes he saw something that made his chest constrict painfully. Not just joy, but hope. And beneath that, a vulnerability that suggested this moment meant far more to her than he had ever imagined. "Father, Cecilia's voice was soft, almost wondering. "I confess I am quite overcome. His Grace has taken me entirely by surprise." "Surprised us all, my dear." Lady Hartley had swooped in, her substantial form quivering with excitement. Such a romantic proposal. Who would have imagined the Duke of Blackridge possessed such a passionate nature, declaring his intentions in front of all of us? How wonderfully unconventional. Marcus stood frozen, trapped by the consequences of his own recklessness. Around him, well-wishers pressed close, offering congratulations, speculating about wedding dates, already calculating the social implications of this unexpected alliance. The Earl of Montfort was beaming, his pride and joy evident in every line of his face. Cecilia herself seemed transported to some realm of happiness he had never before witnessed in her. And he had done this with a thoughtless jest. "Your Grace?" Cecilia's soft voice cut through the cacophony. She stood before him, her expression now questioning, as though she sensed something amiss in his silence. "Are you quite well? You seem rather pale." Marcus forced himself to smile, to take her hand in his, the first time he had ever touched her beyond the formality of a dance or escort. Her fingers were slender and warm, trembling slightly in his grasp. Merely overwhelmed by the suddenness of it all, he managed, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. "Forgive me, Lady Cecilia. I had not planned. That is, I did not expect." "Neither did I," she said softly, her eyes searching his face. "But I am glad, so very glad." The trust in her gaze, the happiness that seemed to radiate from her very being, struck Marcus like a physical blow. In all their months of friendship, all their spirited debates and shared laughter, he had been blind to what now seemed painfully obvious. Cecilia's feelings for him went far deeper than mere friendship, and he had just entrapped her in an engagement based on a moment of foolish levity. "We must set a date." Lady Hartley was already organizing, her voice rising above the general din. "Perhaps a spring wedding. April is lovely, though March could be managed if we—" "Surely there is no need for haste," Marcus interjected, desperate for time to extract himself from this disaster. "Lady Cecilia and I will need time to plan properly." "Nonsense!" Lord Montfort clapped him on the shoulder with the familiarity of a future father-in-law. "When two people know their minds, why delay? Besides, the season is well underway. Best to secure your happiness before some other matter intervenes, eh?" Marcus felt the trap closing around him with each passing moment. The conventions of society, the expectations of propriety, the honor that governed every aspect of his life, all conspired to bind him to this engagement. To withdraw now would be to humiliate Cecilia before all of London, to damage her reputation irreparably, to mark her as the woman rejected by a duke. He could not do it. Not here, not now, not when she looked at him with such joy and trust. "Of course," he heard himself say, the words emerging as though from a great distance. "You are quite right, Lord Montfort. Why delay indeed?" The celebration continued around him, champagne flowing freely, toasts proposed and drunk with enthusiasm. Cecilia remained at his side, her hand still in his, occasionally glancing up at him with an expression that combined happiness with lingering disbelief, as though she feared this might all prove to be some wonderful dream from which she would soon awaken. Marcus played his part, accepting congratulations with appropriate grace, answering questions about his intentions and plans with carefully non-committal responses. But beneath the facade of the delighted bridegroom, his mind raced frantically, seeking some way to extricate himself from this situation without causing irreparable harm. When at last the dinner bell rang, and the company began moving toward the dining room, Marcus found himself escorting Cecilia, her arm tucked through his in a gesture that now felt weighted with obligation rather than casual friendship. "I can scarcely believe it," Cecilia murmured as they walked, her voice pitched for his ears alone. "All these months, I thought, I was certain you regarded me merely as a friend, someone with whom to debate and discuss. I never imagined—" She broke off, her cheeks coloring becomingly. Marcus felt guilt twist in his gut like a knife. "Cecilia," he began, uncertain what he meant to say. "I know I am not the sort of woman you were expected to marry," she continued, her words tumbling out in an uncharacteristic rush. "I am too opinionated, too argumentative, too little concerned with the frivolities that occupy most ladies. But I promise you, Your Grace, I shall endeavour to be a good wife. I shall not embarrass you with my debates or challenge you so publicly. I can moderate my nature, I can—" "Stop," Marcus said more sharply than he intended. The thought of Cecilia suppressing the very qualities that made her herself, that made their friendship so valuable, was somehow worse than all the rest of this catastrophe. "You will do no such thing. I would not have you change yourself." She looked up at him, her dark eyes shining with unshed tears. Of happiness, he realized, with another stab of guilt. "Truly, truly," he confirmed, though the word felt like lead in his mouth. You are quite perfect as you are, Lady Cecilia." She smiled then, brilliantly, and Marcus understood with sinking certainty that he had made this situation infinitely worse. Each word of reassurance, each gesture of apparent affection, would only deepen the eventual wound when the truth came out. For it would have to come out. He could not marry Cecilia based on a lie, could not build a lifetime on the foundation of a thoughtless joke. But how to tell her without destroying her completely? As they entered the dining room, where places of honor had already been arranged for the newly engaged couple, Marcus caught sight of himself in a gilt-framed mirror. The face that looked back at him appeared composed, perhaps even pleased, the very picture of a fortunate man. Only he could see the truth behind the image. He was a coward and a fool, trapped by his own carelessness in a situation from which he could see no honorable escape. The dinner proceeded with interminable slowness. Course followed course. Turtle soup, salmon in cream sauce, roasted pheasant, venison in port wine, delicate pastries and jellies, each accompanied by appropriate wines and abundant conversation. Marcus forced himself to eat, to respond appropriately to the endless stream of well-wishes and barely veiled curiosity about how long he had secretly admired Lady Cecilia. Cecilia herself seemed to glow in the candlelight, more animated and lovely than he had ever seen her. She laughed at jokes, contributed to conversations with her usual intelligence and wit, and occasionally glanced at him with an expression of such happiness that Marcus had to look away, unable to bear the weight of his deception. It was past midnight when the party finally concluded. As Marcus handed Cecilia into her father's carriage, she caught his hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you," she said softly, her eyes meeting his in the lamplight. "For today, for everything. I shall treasure this evening always." Marcus watched the carriage roll away into the London night, Cecilia's face pale in the window as she looked back at him, still smiling. The autumn rain had stopped, leaving the cobblestones gleaming wetly under the gas lamps. The air smelled of coal smoke and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance a clock struck the hour. He stood alone on the steps of Hartley House, the sounds of the dispersing party fading behind him, and confronted the full magnitude of what he had done. He had trapped not only himself, but the woman he genuinely cared for, his friend, his intellectual equal, the one person in London whose company he truly valued, in a false engagement based on a moment of thoughtless humor. And with every passing hour, with every congratulation and celebration, the trap drew tighter, making the eventual revelation of the truth more impossible, more devastating. "What have I done?" Marcus whispered into the empty night, but the darkness offered no answer, only the echo of his own guilt and the memory of Cecilia's trusting, joyful smile. Marcus spent a sleepless night pacing the Persian carpets of his study in Blackridge House, a whiskey decanter, his only companion as the hours crawled toward dawn. The room was lined with books, philosophy, history, political treatises, testaments to a mind that valued logic and reason above all else. Yet tonight those faculties seemed to have abandoned him entirely. He had considered, briefly, writing to Cecilia immediately to clarify the misunderstanding. But even as he sat at his desk, pen in hand, he found himself unable to form the words. How did one explain such a thing in writing? "Dear Lady Cecilia, regarding my proposal last evening, I must inform you that it was merely a jest, and your acceptance has created an unfortunate complication." No, the very thought made him feel ill. By the time his valet arrived at 8 o'clock to prepare him for the day, Marcus had made no progress toward a solution. His reflection in the shaving mirror revealed dark circles beneath his eyes and a general appearance of dissipation that would certainly fuel speculation about a bridegroom's eagerness. "If I may say so, Your Grace appears somewhat fatigued," his valet ventured cautiously as he arranged Marcus's cravat. "Perhaps the excitement of yesterday's announcement—" "That will do, Withers," Marcus said curtly, then immediately regretted his tone. None of this was his long-suffering valet's fault. "Forgive me, I slept poorly." "Quite understandable, Your Grace. It is not every day a gentleman becomes engaged." The word "engaged" sent another wave of guilt through Marcus's chest. By now, news of the betrothal would have spread throughout London like wildfire. The morning newspapers would likely carry announcements. Cecilia's friends would be calling to congratulate her. Her modiste would already be considering designs for a wedding gown, and all of it based on his reckless stupidity. A knock at his chamber door interrupted these grim thoughts. Withers moved to answer it, revealing Marcus's secretary, Mr. Pemberton, clutching what appeared to be several newspapers and a substantial stack of calling cards. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but the Morning Post has brought rather a lot of correspondence." Pemberton's expression suggested he was trying very hard not to appear amused. "Congratulations from various members of the Ton, invitations to celebratory dinners and—" he gestured to the newspapers. "The announcement has appeared in the Times, the Morning Post, and the London Gazette." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Of course it had. Lord Montfort would have wasted no time in making the engagement official and public, securing his daughter's advantageous match before any possibility of the Duke changing his mind. Which, ironically, was precisely what Marcus needed to do. "Very well," he said, accepting the newspapers with a heavy sense of inevitability. "I shall review them in my study. Please inform callers that I am not at home today." "All callers, Your Grace, even—" Pemberton hesitated. "Even the Earl of Montfort. His card is here, and he indicated that he wished to discuss settlements with you at your earliest convenience." Settlements. The formal financial arrangements that would precede the marriage. Another step deeper into this quagmire. "Especially Lord Montfort," Marcus said firmly. "I require time to put my affairs in order before such discussions." It was cowardly, he knew, but he could not face Cecilia's father, a good man whom Marcus genuinely respected. While this deception remained unresolved, he needed to speak with Cecilia first, to find some way to explain without utterly destroying her. But how? The morning dragged interminably. Marcus attempted to distract himself with correspondence and estate matters, but his attention wandered constantly. His mind kept returning to the memory of Cecilia's face at the moment she accepted his proposal. The joy, the disbelief, the hope. He had given her that. With his careless words, he had offered her something she clearly desired deeply, and now he would have to take it away, revealing himself not merely as foolish, but as cruel. By afternoon, Marcus had worked himself into such a state of agitation that when Pemberton announced a visitor, who absolutely refused to be turned away, he was almost grateful for the interruption. His gratitude evaporated when his younger sister, Lady Eleanor Sinclair, swept into his study in a rustle of amber silk and righteous fury. "You absolute fool," Eleanor announced without preamble, fixing him with eyes that were the same brown as his own, but infinitely more perceptive. At 26, Eleanor had been married for 4 years to a baronet she seemed to genuinely esteem, a fact that made Marcus value her opinion on romantic matters, though he would never admit it aloud. "Good afternoon to you as well, sister dear," Marcus said wearily, gesturing toward a chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?" "Don't play the innocent with me, Marcus." Eleanor remained standing, her expression stern. "I have just come from calling on Lady Cecilia Montfort, your betrothed in case you had forgotten, and found her in a state of such happiness it would move stones to tears. She spoke of you with such affection, such genuine joy at the prospect of becoming your wife, that I felt physically ill with the knowledge of what you have done." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "She told you? That you proposed to her at the Hartley dinner as a jest?" "No, she did not." "She believes your proposal was genuine, Marcus. She believes you care for her." Eleanor's voice dropped to a tone of withering scorn. "But I know you, brother. I know that look you had yesterday when I saw you across that drawing room, that expression of abject horror poorly concealed. You trapped yourself with careless words, did you not?" There was no point in denying it. Eleanor had always been able to read him better than anyone. Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "It was meant as a jest," he admitted quietly. "We were debating, as we often do, and she was so passionate and brilliant in her arguments that I was overcome with admiration and affection. I said she would make an excellent wife, and then, like a complete fool, I asked her to marry me. I meant it as a compliment, Eleanor, a way of acknowledging how much I value her mind and company. But she accepted before I could clarify, and then her father was there, and all of London society bore witness, and You could not bring yourself to humiliate her by revealing the truth," Eleanor finished. She moved to sit across from him, her expression softening slightly. "Oh, Marcus, what a terrible muddle you have made. I am aware of that. Thank you." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, destroying Withers's careful styling. "I have been trying all night and morning to determine how to extricate us both from this situation without destroying Cecilia's reputation and happiness. I can see no solution." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, studying him with uncomfortable intensity. "Do you care for her at all? Lady Cecilia, I mean, in any capacity beyond friendship?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I value her friendship above nearly all others," he said slowly. "She is intelligent, witty, fearless in expressing her convictions. She challenges me intellectually in ways no other woman of my acquaintance does. I enjoy her company immensely." "But you do not love her?" "I had not thought of her in those terms," Marcus admitted. "She has been my friend for nearly 2 years. Marriage, romantic love, these were simply not considerations I associated with Cecilia." "Because you are an idiot," Eleanor said bluntly. "Marcus, I have observed you together on numerous occasions. The way you light up when she enters a room, the way you seek her out in company, the way you laugh, truly laugh, at her wit. Most men would recognize these as signs of at least the potential for deeper feeling. But you, in your arrogance, assumed friendship was the ceiling of your regard, rather than merely its foundation." Marcus wanted to protest, but found he could not. Was Eleanor right? Had he been blind to his own feelings, so caught up in the comfortable safety of friendship that he failed to recognize something deeper? "Even if that were true," he said carefully, "it does not change the fundamental dishonesty of this engagement. Cecilia believes I proposed out of genuine romantic feeling. To marry her while allowing her to persist in that belief would be to build our entire marriage on a lie." "Then tell her the truth," Eleanor said simply. "And break her heart? Humiliate her before all of society?" Marcus shook his head. "I saw her face yesterday, Eleanor. This means something to her, something important. How can I destroy that?" "How can you not?" Eleanor leaned forward, her expression intent. "Marcus, you speak of not wishing to hurt her, but consider what you are proposing instead. You would marry her while harboring this secret, allowing her to believe a fiction about the nature of your feelings. What happens when she eventually discovers the truth? And she will discover it. Secrets of this magnitude always emerge. Then you will have not merely wounded her, but betrayed her trust completely. Is that truly the more honorable course?" Marcus felt the truth of her words like blows. She was right, of course. Perpetuating the deception would only compound the original injury. But the alternative, confessing now, revealing the cruel joke at the heart of this engagement, seemed equally impossible. "I do not know what to do," he said finally, the admission costing him dearly. "For perhaps the first time in my life, Eleanor, I am utterly at a loss." His sister's expression softened with sympathy. "Then I shall tell you what you must do, though you will not like it. You must go to Lady Cecilia and tell her the truth, all of it. How the proposal came about, why you did not correct the misunderstanding immediately, and what your true feelings are, insofar as you understand them. You must give her the choice of how to proceed with full knowledge of the circumstances. She will despise me," Marcus said quietly. "Perhaps," Eleanor acknowledged, "but at least she will despise you honestly, rather than loving you falsely. And, Marcus," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "you must do this soon. Every day that passes, every gesture of courtship you make, every tender word or gift will only make the eventual revelation more devastating. If you care for her at all, you will not allow her to sink deeper into this illusion." Marcus knew she was right. The honorable course, the only course, was to confess immediately and face the consequences. But the thought of seeing Cecilia's joy transform into hurt and betrayal, of watching hope die in her eyes, was almost more than he could bear. "I shall call on her tomorrow," he said finally. "I will explain everything, and accept whatever judgment she renders." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "See that you do, and Marcus, for what it is worth, I believe you care for Lady Cecilia far more than you realize. Perhaps this catastrophe will force you to examine feelings you have long taken for granted." After his sister departed, Marcus sat alone in his study as afternoon faded into evening. He had committed to confessing the truth tomorrow, to ending this deception before it could cause further harm. It was the right decision, the only decision, yet the prospect filled him with a dread that had nothing to do with his own discomfort. He was afraid of hurting Cecilia, not merely of the social embarrassment or the scandal, but of genuinely wounding someone for whom he cared deeply. Somewhere beneath the friendship and intellectual companionship, beneath his own blindness and stupidity, there existed real feeling. He recognized that now. But was it love? And did it matter when he had already ensured through his own carelessness that Cecilia would never trust his feelings again? Marcus poured another whiskey and watched darkness fall over London, steeling himself for the conversation that would, one way or another, alter both their lives forever. The next morning arrived with grey skies that threatened rain, matching Marcus's mood as his carriage rolled through London toward the Montford townhouse in Grosvenor Square. He had rehearsed what he would say a dozen times, but each version seemed inadequate to the magnitude of his confession. The Montford butler showed him into an elegant morning room, decorated in shades of cream and pale blue. Cecilia rose as he entered, her face lighting with a smile that struck him like a physical blow. "Your Grace, what a wonderful surprise!" She was dressed in a simple morning gown of lavender muslin, her dark hair arranged in soft curls that framed her face. She looked young and lovely and entirely too happy to see him. "I had not expected you to call today. Father mentioned you were occupied with estate matters." "Lady Cecilia," Marcus bowed, his throat suddenly tight. "I hope I am not intruding. I wish to speak with you privately, if you would permit it." "Of course." Cecilia gestured to the butler to close the doors, then seated herself on a small sofa, indicating the space beside her. "Come, sit. You seem quite serious, Your Grace." "Is something amiss?" Marcus remained standing, unable to bear the intimacy of sitting beside her while preparing to shatter her happiness. "Cecilia, I must speak with you about our engagement, about how it came to pass." "Our engagement?" She tilted her head, puzzled but not yet alarmed. "I confess I am still quite astonished by the whole affair. You're not having second thoughts, are you? I know I can be rather outspoken and unconventional, but I truly believe we should suit well. Our minds are compatible and—" "Please let me speak," Marcus interrupted gently. He moved to the window, unable to meet her eyes for what he must say. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear. I beg you to allow me to finish before you respond." The quality of silence behind him changed, acquiring a tension that suggested Cecilia had recognized the gravity of his tone. "Very well," she said quietly. "I am listening." Marcus forced himself to begin, the words emerging with painful slowness. "At the Hartley dinner, when I proposed to you, He paused, gathered his courage, and turned to face her. She deserved to see his expression, to judge his sincerity for herself. "It was meant as a jest, Cecilia, a thoughtless joke born of my enjoyment of our debate and my admiration for your passion and intelligence. I never intended it as a genuine proposal of marriage." He watched the words register, saw understanding dawn in her eyes, followed immediately by confusion and hurt. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale as marble. "A jest?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You proposed to me as a joke?" "Yes," Marcus said, the admission heavy with shame. "I did not mean, I never intended for you to accept. I thought the absurdity of the situation, the public setting, would make clear that I was being facetious. But you responded before I could clarify, and then your father arrived and society bore witness, and I—" He paused, struggling for words adequate to his failure. "I could not bring myself to humiliate you by revealing the truth in that moment. So I allowed the misunderstanding to continue, thinking I would find some private way to explain. But with each passing hour the deception only deepened, and now you come to tell me the truth." Cecilia finished, her voice remarkably steady, though her hands trembled in her lap. "How very noble of you, Your Grace." The coldness in her tone, the formal address after so long using his Christian name in private conversation, cut deeper than any accusation could have. "I know my behavior has been reprehensible," Marcus said desperately. "I know there is no excuse for such carelessness, for allowing you to believe—" He broke off, unable to continue under the weight of her gaze. Cecilia rose slowly, her movements careful, controlled. "Let me see if I understand correctly. You found our debate so amusing that you jokingly proposed marriage, never imagining I might accept such an offer from you. When I did accept, with joy, with genuine happiness at the prospect of becoming your wife, you realized you had made a terrible mistake, but could not bring yourself to correct it immediately. So instead, you allowed me to spend 2 days believing myself beloved, permitted my father to announce our engagement to all of society, and let me plan a future that you had no intention of honoring." Her voice remained calm, unnaturally so, as though she feared that showing emotion would shatter her completely. "Is that an accurate summary of events?" "Yes," Marcus said wretchedly. "Cecilia, I am—" "Do not." She held up one hand, stopping him. "Do not apologize. Do not tell me you never meant to hurt me. Your intentions are irrelevant compared to the reality of what you have done." "You have every right to be angry," Marcus began, but Cecilia laughed, a harsh, bitter sound utterly unlike her usual warm mirth. "Angry? Oh, Your Grace, anger would be a mercy. What I feel is humiliation so profound I can scarcely draw breath. Do you know what I told my friends yesterday? How I described your proposal? I said it was romantic, that you had declared your feelings before all of London because you could no longer contain them. I wept with joy, Marcus. I actually wept because the man I had admired for 2 years, the man whose friendship I treasured above all others, had finally seen me as something more than a convenient debating partner. Each word struck Marcus like a lash. "You cared for me," he said, understanding finally dawning with terrible clarity. "Truly cared for me beyond mere friendship. Of course I cared for you." Cecilia's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks, though her voice remained steady. "Did you think I spent all those hours in your company, sought your opinions, valued your friendship simply to pass the time? I have been in love with you for months, Marcus. Desperately, foolishly in love, with a man who apparently viewed me as little more than an entertaining companion with whom to practice his wit." The confession hung between them, raw and painful. Marcus felt something twist in his chest, grief, perhaps, or recognition of something precious destroyed before he had even recognized its existence. "I never viewed you as merely entertainment," he said hoarsely. "Cecilia, you are my dearest friend. I value your mind, your spirit, your courage more than I can express. If I failed to recognize my own feelings, if I was blind to the depth of yours, it was not from lack of regard, but from—" "From what?" Cecilia demanded, anger finally breaking through her controlled facade. "From what, Marcus? Stupidity, arrogance, the assumption that I, with my unfeminine opinions and inappropriate debates, could never be worthy of romantic consideration? That a woman like me should be grateful for friendship and never dare to hope for more? No!" Marcus crossed the room without thinking, desperate to make her understand. "It was none of those things. I simply never allowed myself to consider you in that light because I valued our friendship too highly to risk it. The women I was expected to marry were insipid creatures with whom I had nothing in common. You were different. You were real and honest and yourself. I placed you in a separate category, thinking I was honoring you, when in truth I was merely protecting myself from examining feelings that frightened me." Cecilia stared at him, tears still tracking down her cheeks. "And now that you have been forced to examine those feelings, what have you discovered?" It was the crux of everything, the question that had haunted Marcus through his sleepless night. He could give her comfortable lies, could claim the indifference his careless proposal suggested, or he could offer the truth, raw and uncertain as it was. "I have discovered," he said slowly, meeting her eyes with all the honesty he possessed, "that I am a fool who very nearly destroyed something precious out of sheer blindness. I have discovered that your absence from my life these past 2 days has been agony, that the thought of hurting you, of causing the pain I now see in your face, is unbearable. I have discovered that what I dismissed as mere friendship may in fact have been love all along." hidden even from myself because I was too cowardly to acknowledge it. For a long moment, Cecilia simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she shook her head slowly, fresh tears spilling. "It is too late," she whispered. "Even if what you say is true, even if you do care for me, how can I believe it? How can I trust anything you say after this? You trapped me in a false engagement, Marcus. You allowed me to parade my happiness before society, while knowing it was all based on a cruel joke. Every word of affection you might speak now is tainted by that deception. I will never know if you mean it, or if you are simply trying to salvage the situation." The truth of her words struck Marcus like a blow. She was right. He had destroyed the very foundation on which trust might have been built. Even if his feelings were genuine, even if he had finally recognized the depth of his regard for her, she would have no way to believe him. "What would you have me do?" he asked quietly, accepting his defeat. "I will honor any decision you make regarding our engagement. If you wish to end it, I will take full public responsibility. I will ensure society knows the fault was entirely mine, that you were the victim of my thoughtless behavior. Your reputation will be protected as much as possible." Cecilia laughed again, that same bitter sound. "My reputation. Marcus, the moment you withdraw from this engagement, for whatever reason, I become the woman rejected by a duke. Society will speculate endlessly about what deficiency in me caused you to change your mind. I will be pitied, gossiped about, and marked as undesirable marriage material for any other gentleman of good standing. Then what would you have me do?" Marcus repeated, his own frustration breaking through. "I have confessed the truth, because to do otherwise would have been a greater betrayal. I have acknowledged my feelings such as I understand them. I have offered to accept the consequences of my actions. What more can I do, Cecilia?" "You can leave," she said quietly, turning away from him to stare out the window at the grey London morning. "You can leave and allow me time to consider what I wish to do about this disaster you have created. Whether I choose to end our engagement or continue it, the decision must be mine alone, made without pressure or persuasion from you." Marcus wanted to protest, to argue that leaving now meant abandoning her to face this crisis alone. But he recognized the justice in her request. He had taken away her agency once with his careless proposal. The least he could do was allow her to reclaim it now. "Very well," he said softly. "I will await your decision. But Cecilia—" He paused at the door, needing her to hear this even if she could not yet believe it. "I am truly sorry. For the joke, for the deception, for failing to see what was before me until it was too late. You deserved far better than what I have given you." She did not turn from the window, did not acknowledge his words beyond a slight nod. Marcus let himself out, each step away from her, feeling like a small death. As his carriage rolled away from Grosvenor Square, Marcus stared blindly at the passing streets and finally allowed himself to confront the full weight of Eleanor's accusation. He had been an idiot, blind, arrogant, and foolish. He had taken Cecilia's friendship for granted, never questioning why her company pleased him above all others, why he sought her opinion before anyone else's, why her laughter could transform his entire day. He had loved her, perhaps, for longer than he realized, and through his own carelessness and cowardice he had ensured that she would never be able to trust that love, even if it were genuine. The rain that had threatened all morning finally broke. As his carriage pulled up to Blackridge House, sheets of water washing over the cobblestones like tears. Marcus sat in the downpour for a long moment, before finally ascending the steps to his empty home, wondering if he had just made the greatest mistake of his life, not in making a foolish joke, but in waiting too long to recognize what truly mattered. 3 weeks passed with no word from Cecilia. Marcus honored her request for time and space, though it cost him dearly. He did not call at the Montford residence, did not attempt to send notes or gifts, did not try to force a resolution through intermediaries. Instead, he endured the peculiar torture of seeing their engagement announced in the newspapers while knowing the truth behind it, of accepting congratulations from acquaintances while uncertainty gnawed at him constantly. Society, of course, noticed his absence from Lady Cecilia's side. Speculation ran rampant through drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs. Whispers that the Duke had developed cold feet, that Lady Cecilia had revealed some deficiency of character, that the engagement was not quite as solid as initially believed. Marcus ignored it all, refusing to provide fuel for the gossip mongers through either comment or reaction. But ignoring society did not mean he could ignore the ache of Cecilia's absence from his life. It was remarkable, he reflected during his solitary evenings, how completely one person could infiltrate every aspect of existence without one's awareness. He would begin to read a political treatise and think Cecilia would have thoughts on this, before remembering that Cecilia's thoughts were no longer available to him. He would attend parliamentary sessions and find himself composing arguments in his head, anticipating her responses, only to return to an empty house where those conversations could never occur. Eleanor called regularly, providing what news she could glean from her own visits to Lady Cecilia, though she made clear her displeasure at having to play messenger. "She attends functions when she must," Eleanor reported one grey afternoon as they took tea in Marcus's library, "but she leaves early." Lady Montfort is beside herself with worry, though Cecilia insists she is merely fatigued. "She does not speak of you, Marcus, not to condemn, not to defend, not even to acknowledge your existence. It is as though you have become a ghost, haunting the edges of her life." "Has she decided anything?" Marcus asked, the question he always asked, though he dreaded the answer. "If she has not confided it to me." Eleanor studied him with sympathy. "You look dreadful, brother. When did you last eat a proper meal or sleep through the night?" "I manage adequately." Marcus returned to the window, his favourite position lately, staring out at the London streets without truly seeing them. "I can hardly complain of discomfort, given what I have inflicted upon her." "Self-flagellation serves no purpose," Eleanor said tartly. "What you need is to determine what you truly want from this situation. Not what honour demands, not what society expects, but what your own heart desires." "My heart," Marcus said bitterly, "has proven itself remarkably unreliable in matters of any importance." "Then perhaps it is time to become better acquainted with it." Eleanor rose, preparing to depart. "Cecilia will make her decision eventually, Marcus. But when she does, you must be prepared to act on your own convictions, rather than simply reacting to hers. Determine what you want, and be ready to fight for it." After she left, Marcus contemplated his sister's words. What did he want? The question seemed simple, yet its answer eluded him. He wanted Cecilia to forgive him, certainly. He wanted to restore the friendship they had shared, the easy companionship and intellectual exchange. But was that all? The memory of her tear-stained face haunted him. "I have been in love with you for months, Marcus. Desperately, foolishly in love. Love." The word that had terrified him for so long, that he had avoided considering in relation to Cecilia, because acknowledging it would have required action, vulnerability, risk. But what was he risking now? He had already lost her friendship through his cowardice. He had already wounded her through his blindness. What remained to fear? That night, unable to sleep, Marcus finally allowed himself to examine his feelings with complete honesty. He loved Cecilia, not merely as a friend, not simply as an intellectual companion, but with the full depth of romantic attachment he had so carefully avoided acknowledging. He loved her wit and her passion, her fearlessness and her compassion. He loved the way she challenged him, provoked him, made him think beyond his comfortable assumptions. He loved her laughter, her intelligence, even her stubborn refusal to moderate her opinions to suit social expectations. He loved her, and through his own foolishness he had destroyed any chance of her believing it. The recognition brought not relief, but a deeper ache. What use was understanding his feelings when he had forfeited the right to express them, when any declaration now would sound like manipulation or desperate salvage rather than genuine sentiment? Morning found him still awake, staring at the dying fire in his grate, wrestling with impossible questions. He had made such a muddle of everything, the proposal, the confession, the aftermath. Every choice had been wrong, or at least wrongly timed. How did one recover from such comprehensive failure? The answer came not through logic, but through memory. He recalled their first meeting at a parliamentary wives' tea that Cecilia had been attending with her stepmother. She had been engaged in heated debate with Lord Thornbury about voting reform, her eyes flashing with conviction as she demolished his arguments with precision and wit. Marcus had been captivated instantly, not by her appearance, though she was lovely, but by the fierce intelligence animating her features. He had introduced himself afterward, unable to resist engaging with someone so refreshingly unafraid of controversy. Their friendship had grown from that moment, built on mutual respect and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. Those foundations had been real, untainted by deception or misunderstanding. Perhaps, Marcus thought as dawn light began filtering through his windows, those foundations could be rebuilt. Not through grand gestures or passionate declarations, but through the same slow accumulation of trust and respect that had created their friendship in the first place. If Cecilia chose to continue their engagement, and that remained a significant if, perhaps he could prove his sincerity through consistency rather than words, through showing rather than telling. It was a fragile hope, but it was hope nonetheless. The answer came on a Tuesday morning in the form of Lord Montfort himself, appearing at Blackridge House with an expression that suggested the visit was as uncomfortable for him as it would undoubtedly prove for Marcus. "Your Grace," Montfort said stiffly once they were closeted in Marcus's study, "I apologize for calling without notice, but circumstances require immediate discussion." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Has Lady Cecilia made a decision regarding our engagement?" "She has." Montfort's weathered face was difficult to read. "She wishes to continue with the betrothal and proceed toward marriage. However," he paused, clearly struggling with what he must say next. "However, she has made clear to me that certain difficulties have arisen between you. She would not elaborate on their nature, but she has requested that the engagement period be extended to allow more time for preparation. The wedding will not take place until late spring at the earliest." Relief and confusion warred within Marcus. She was continuing the engagement, but under what terms? What understanding? "I see," he said carefully. "Did Lady Cecilia indicate any other preferences regarding the arrangement?" Montfort's expression grew even more uncomfortable. "She specified that she expects a courtship period during which you will demonstrate," he consulted a note, "appropriate attention and regard consistent with genuine affection. I confess, Your Grace, I am puzzled by this stipulation. Is there some reason my daughter doubts your affection?" The question hung heavy in the air. Marcus could lie, could claim simple premarital nerves or some other innocuous explanation, but Montfort deserved better than further deception. "There has been a misunderstanding between us," Marcus said carefully, "regarding the nature of my original proposal. Lady Cecilia has reason to question the sincerity of my regard, and she is giving me opportunity to demonstrate it through my actions rather than my words. I believe this is an entirely reasonable request." Montfort studied him for a long moment, his shrewd eyes seeing more than Marcus would have preferred. "I see," he said finally. "Then I trust, Your Grace, that you will rise to this challenge. My daughter is extraordinarily dear to me. If you harbor doubts about this union, now is the time to voice them. I would rather dissolve the engagement now than watch Cecilia enter an unhappy marriage." "I have no doubts," Marcus said firmly, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "I will meet Lady Cecilia's expectations and prove myself worthy of her regard. You have my word." "Then we shall proceed." Montfort's expression softened slightly. "I hope, for both your sakes, that this difficulty can be resolved. Cecilia has been not herself lately. I would see her happy again." After Montfort departed, Marcus sat alone with this unexpected development. Cecilia was giving him a chance. Not forgiveness, not trust, but opportunity. She would continue the engagement, allow him proximity, but she would make him earn every scrap of her regard. It was more than he deserved, and less than he wanted, but it was something. He would not waste it. His first opportunity came that evening at the Pemberton soiree, one of the season's major social events. Marcus arrived deliberately late, knowing Cecilia would already be in attendance. He spotted her across the crowded ballroom, dressed in sapphire silk that made her dark eyes seem even more luminous. She was speaking with a young gentleman Marcus vaguely recognized as Lord James Ashford, and her laugh, that warm, genuine laugh he had not heard in weeks, struck him like a blow. She had laughed for Ashford, but not for him. The recognition stung, but Marcus forced himself to observe rather than react. Cecilia was beautiful when she laughed, her whole face transforming with joy. That he had stolen that joy through his carelessness was perhaps his greatest crime. He approached carefully, not wishing to startle her. "Lady Cecilia." "Lord Ashford." Cecilia's expression shuttered instantly upon seeing him, the laughter dying from her eyes. "Your Grace," she said with perfect politeness and complete emotional distance. How unexpected to see you here. I could not miss the opportunity to see you, Marcus said quietly, pitching his voice for her ears alone. It has been too long. 3 weeks, Cecilia said coolly. Hardly an eternity, though I understand time passes differently for some than others. Lord Ashford, clearly sensing undercurrents beyond his understanding, made his excuses and withdrew. Marcus seized the opportunity to step closer, though he maintained proper distance. I received your decision through your father, he said. Thank you for giving me this chance. Do not thank me yet, Cecilia replied, her dark eyes meeting his with unsettling directness. I have not forgiven you, Marcus. I have merely decided that dissolving our engagement would cause more harm than continuing it, to both of our reputations and to my father's satisfaction. But this is a business arrangement now, not a love match. You wished to avoid marriage based on false sentiment. Consider your wish granted. The words were knives, each one finding its mark. Is that truly what you want? Marcus asked softly. A marriage in name only, built on obligation rather than affection? What I wanted is no longer relevant, Cecilia said, her composure never wavering. You made certain of that when you revealed the foundations of this engagement. Now I will settle for what is practical and socially advantageous. Surely you, with your logical mind and realistic expectations, can appreciate that approach. She was using his own words against him, the arguments he had made during their debates about emotion versus reason. Marcus recognized the tactic, even as it wounded him. I was wrong, he said simply. About many things, but especially about the relationship between logic and feeling. I thought I was being reasonable by dismissing romantic sentiment. I failed to recognize that some things, some people, transcend mere reason. Cecilia's expression flickered. Surprise, perhaps, or hurt, or both. Pretty words, she said, her voice hardening. But words are cheap, Your Grace. Anyone can claim affection after being caught in a cruel joke. I require proof, not poetry. Then proof you shall have, Marcus promised. Whatever you need from me, whatever demonstration of sincerity you require, I will provide it. Only tell me what will convince you. I will tell you nothing, Cecilia said firmly. This is not an examination where I provide the answers in advance. You must determine for yourself what genuine regard looks like, what real courtship entails. If you cannot do that without instruction, then you prove my point, that your feelings are hollow performance rather than authentic sentiment. It was a test, Marcus realized, one without clear parameters or known endpoints. She would judge his every action, every word, every gesture against some standard she would not articulate. He would be forced to act from genuine feeling rather than calculated strategy. It was brilliant and terrifying. I understand, he said quietly. Then I shall endeavor to prove myself worthy of you, Cecilia, in whatever way I can. Lady Cecilia, she corrected sharply. We are no longer on terms of such familiarity, Your Grace. Propriety must be observed. The formal address hurt more than all the rest. They had been Marcus and Cecilia in private for over a year. To be relegated back to titles and distance was to lose something precious that might never be recovered. As you wish, he said, accepting yet another punishment for his failures. Lady Cecilia. She nodded, then turned away to rejoin the other guests, leaving Marcus alone with the recognition that this would be infinitely harder than he had imagined. Cecilia would give him no assistance, no encouragement, no sign that his efforts were effective. He would have to navigate entirely by instinct and hope, trying to reach someone who had armored herself against him. But as he watched her move through the ballroom, graceful and guarded, Marcus felt something solidify within him. He had made a catastrophic mistake, yes. He had wounded someone he cared for deeply. But he would not compound that mistake by giving up, or by offering anything less than his complete, genuine effort at redemption. Cecilia deserved his best. Finally, belatedly, he would give it to her. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced or imagined. He called at the Montford residence daily, always properly chaperoned, bringing flowers that Cecilia accepted with polite thanks and no visible pleasure. He escorted her to exhibitions and concerts, where she maintained perfect propriety and emotional distance. He engaged her in conversation on topics he knew interested her, only to receive responses that were intelligent but impersonal, as though she was speaking to an acquaintance rather than her betrothed. Lord Ashford called often as well, Marcus noted with growing unease, and Cecilia seemed to enjoy his company far more than Marcus's, laughing at his jokes, engaging with his observations, showing the warmth and animation she denied Marcus. Whether she did this deliberately to wound him, or whether Ashford simply pleased her more, Marcus could not determine. But watching another man make Cecilia smile while his own presence only brought guardedness was its own form of torture. "You are losing her," Eleanor observed after encountering them at a gallery showing, where Cecilia had stood with Ashford viewing paintings while Marcus trailed behind like an unwanted shadow. "She is moving on, Marcus. Can you not see it?" "I see it," Marcus said grimly. "But what would you have me do? I cannot force her feelings. I can only continue demonstrating mine and hope that eventually she will believe them genuine." "Then demonstrate them more effectively," Eleanor urged. "Grand gestures, brother. Declarations. Show her through action that she matters more to you than pride or propriety." But what grand gesture could penetrate Cecilia's armor? What declaration could she not dismiss as calculated performance? Marcus found himself paralyzed between the need to prove his sincerity and the fear that any attempt to do so would only confirm her belief that he was playing a role rather than revealing genuine feeling. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. At yet another society function, the Carlisle ball notable primarily for the excessive heat produced by too many people in too small a space, Marcus had been standing near the refreshment table, watching Cecilia dance with Lord Ashford for the third time that evening, when he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Poor Duke of Blackridge," Lady Pembroke was saying to her companion, her voice carrying clearly over the music. "Trapped by his own careless words into an engagement with a woman entirely unsuitable for his station. One can hardly blame him for looking so miserable at these events." "She is pretty enough," her companion replied, "but far too opinionated for a duchess. Can you imagine Lady Cecilia presiding over Blackridge House? She would alienate half of society with her forward views within a month." "I heard," Lady Pembroke continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially but not enough, "that he only proposed as a jest, and she deliberately trapped him by accepting publicly before he could clarify. Quite calculating of her, really, though one supposes she had little other prospect of such an advantageous match given her unfortunate temperament." Marcus moved before conscious thought intervened, crossing to the gossiping women with an expression that made them blanch. "Ladies," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I could not help but overhear your fascinating discussion of my private affairs. Allow me to clarify several points. First, I proposed to Lady Cecilia because I recognized in her something I had been too blind to see earlier, a woman of extraordinary intelligence, compassion, and strength of character. Second, far from being trapped, I count myself extraordinarily fortunate that she accepted me. Third, if you or anyone else in this ballroom suggests again that Lady Cecilia is anything less than entirely worthy of becoming Duchess of Blackridge, you will discover precisely how unpleasant I can make your remaining time in society. Do I make myself clear?" Lady Pembroke had gone quite pale. "Your Grace, we meant no disrespect." "Then I suggest you endeavor more successfully in that aim," Marcus said coldly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have more pleasant company to attend to." He turned away, dismissing them completely, and crossed the ballroom toward where Cecilia had just finished her dance with Ashford. She watched him approach with her usual guarded expression, but something in his face must have revealed his anger, because her eyes widened slightly. "Is something amiss?" she asked. "Walk with me," Marcus said, offering his arm. It was not a request. Cecilia glanced at her stepmother, received a nod of permission, and allowed Marcus to escort her onto the terrace, where the cool night air provided relief from the oppressive heat inside. Other couples strolled the gardens, but Marcus guided them to a more secluded corner, near a fountain where the sound of water provided privacy. "What has happened?" Cecilia demanded once they were alone. "You look quite fierce." "I overheard Lady Pembroke and her companion discussing us, with speculation that was both cruel and false," Marcus said, anger still simmering in his voice. "They suggested that you trapped me into this engagement through calculation, that you are unsuitable to be my Duchess, that I regard you as a burden." Cecilia's expression shuttered. "I see. And this troubles you because it is lies," Marcus said forcefully. "Because they malign you unjustly." Because... He stopped, realized this was the moment, the opportunity to finally break through her armor or fail completely. He chose truth. Because hearing someone disparage the woman I love, as though she were some scheming fortune hunter, made me want to call them out for their insult. Cecilia went very still. "The woman you love," she repeated flatly. "How convenient that you should discover this love, just when my reputation is being questioned. What a coincidence that your feelings should suddenly clarify when defending me serves your own interests." "Damn my interests," Marcus said, with uncharacteristic vulgarity. "And damn propriety and society's expectations and everything else that has prevented me from saying what I should have said weeks ago. I love you, Cecilia, not because it is convenient or expected or beneficial to my reputation. I love you because you are brilliant and passionate, and the only person in London who makes me feel truly alive. I love you because I am miserable without your friendship, desolate without your laughter, lost without your presence in my life." "Stop," Cecilia whispered. But Marcus could not stop, would not stop, not when he was finally saying what he should have recognized months ago. "I love you because you challenge me to be better than I am, because you see through all my pretensions and posturing to the man beneath, because when I am with you, I am not the Duke of Blackridge performing his role. I am simply Marcus, and that is enough. I love you because—" "Stop," Cecilia said again, louder this time, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Please, Marcus, stop. I cannot bear this." "Why not?" Marcus stepped closer, desperate now, knowing he was either saving or destroying everything with these words. "Because you do not believe me. Because you think this is another performance. Then tell me what I must do, Cecilia. Tell me what proof you require, and I will provide it. I will shout my love from the rooftops of every building in London, if that would convince you. I will dissolve Parliament and reform every factory in England, if that would prove my regard. Tell me what you need." "I need—" Cecilia's voice broke. "I need to believe that you mean this. That you are not simply saying what you think I wish to hear because gossips are threatening your precious reputation. I need—" She turned away, one hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Marcus acted on pure instinct, drawing her into his arms despite propriety, despite the possibility that someone might see, despite everything except the need to comfort her. "Then believe this," he said softly against her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender that he had missed so desperately. "I am a fool who very nearly destroyed the best thing in his life through blindness and cowardice. But I see you now, Cecilia. I see you and I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it if you will only give me the chance." For a long moment, Cecilia remained rigid in his embrace, as though she could not decide whether to accept or reject this comfort. Then, slowly, she softened against him, allowing herself to be held, her tears soaking into his coat. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "I want so desperately to believe you, Marcus. But I am terrified that if I do, if I let myself hope again, you will wound me even more deeply than before." "I know," Marcus said, tightening his arms around her. "I know, and I have no one to blame but myself for that fear. All I can offer is time and consistency. Let me prove through my actions what my words alone cannot convey. Let me show you, day after day, that my love is real and constant and worthy of your trust." Cecilia pulled back slightly, searching his face with red-rimmed eyes that held both hope and fear. "And if I cannot learn to trust you, if the damage is too great, then I will accept that as the consequence of my own failures," Marcus said honestly. "But I will not stop loving you, Cecilia, even if you never return that love, even if you ultimately choose someone else, Lord Ashford perhaps, who makes you laugh without causing you pain. I will still love you. That much, at least, is beyond my control." A small, broken laugh escaped Cecilia. "Lord Ashford makes me laugh because he is harmless and uncomplicated and requires nothing of me emotionally. He is safe in a way you have never been, Marcus. You have always affected me too deeply, made me feel too much. That is why your betrayal hurt so terribly, because I cared so much." "And now?" Marcus asked, hardly daring to breathe. "Now I am still angry at you, still wounded, still uncertain whether I can trust these feelings you claim." Cecilia touched his face gently, her fingers trembling. "But I want to try. Against my better judgment, against all reason and self-protection, I want to give us, Give you another chance. I need to give us another chance. Does that make me foolish? It makes you merciful, Marcus said, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. Far more merciful than I deserve. But I will not waste this gift, Cecilia. I swear to you, I will earn back your trust, your affection, your love. However long it takes. Then we shall see, Cecilia said softly. We shall see if actions truly do speak louder than words. But Marcus, her expression grew serious. No more deceptions, no more performances or calculations. If we are to build something real, it must be founded on complete honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable or unflattering. Can you promise me that? I promise, Marcus said solemnly. No more masks, no more pretense. You will have all of me, Cecilia, the good and the deeply flawed. Only please allow me to call you Cecilia again rather than Lady Cecilia. That formality has felt like a wall between us. A genuine smile touched Cecilia's lips for the first time in weeks, small and tentative but real. Very well, Marcus, no more walls, though I make no promises about when or if I shall allow you to kiss me properly rather than merely my hand. I will wait, Marcus said, though the thought of kissing Cecilia properly, of holding her without restraint, without the shadow of his betrayal between them, made his heart ache with longing. I will wait as long as necessary. They stood together on the terrace, the sounds of the ball continuing inside, the fountain singing its endless song beside them. It was not a resolution, Marcus knew. Not forgiveness, not complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain, but genuine. And for now that would have to be enough. The weeks that followed brought a transformation in Marcus and Cecilia's relationship that was subtle but profound. True to his word, Marcus made no grand gestures or elaborate declarations. Instead, he focused on consistency, showing up, paying attention, demonstrating through small daily actions that his regard was genuine and enduring. He called every afternoon at the Montford residence, bringing not expensive gifts but thoughtful tokens. A pamphlet on factory reform he thought would interest her, a newspaper article about women's education in America, a particularly fine lavender sachet when he noticed her previous one had faded. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, not merely waiting for his turn to reply, and remembered the things she told him, referencing them in later conversations to show his attention was genuine. When they attended social functions together, Marcus made no effort to monopolize her time. Instead, he remained available but not oppressive, allowing Cecilia to engage with others while ensuring she knew he was present should she need or want him. He defended her publicly when necessary, cutting off gossip with a look, redirecting conversation when someone made dismissive comments about women's intelligence or capabilities, but without making a show of it. Most importantly, he showed her his own vulnerabilities. He confessed his doubts about parliamentary debates before they occurred. He admitted when he felt out of his depth in social situations. He shared his conflicts about ducal responsibilities and personal desires. He allowed her to see not the polished facade of the Duke of Blackridge, but Marcus, uncertain, flawed, human. Cecilia responded slowly, like a flower opening to sunlight after a long frost. Her guardedness gradually eased. Her smiles became more frequent and genuine. She began seeking him out in crowds, rather than merely accepting his presence. Most tellingly, her laughter returned, not the polite social laughter she produced for others, but her real laugh, warm and unrestrained. One afternoon in early March, as they strolled through Hyde Park with Cecilia's maid trailing at a discreet distance, she suddenly slipped her hand into his arm with a naturalness that suggested she had stopped thinking of the gesture as significant or symbolic. "I have been thinking," she said, her eyes on the path ahead where early daffodils were beginning to emerge, "about what you said on the Carlisle terrace, about loving me because I make you feel alive." Marcus's heart began beating faster, but he kept his voice steady. Every word was true. "I know," Cecilia said quietly. "I believe that now. Not because you have said it repeatedly, but because I see it in how you look at me, how you listen, how you remember small details I mention. Love is not in declarations but in attention, is it not? In the choice to show up day after day, even when nothing particularly exciting is happening." "Yes," Marcus agreed, hardly daring to hope where this conversation might lead. "That is precisely it." "Then I must confess something to you," Cecilia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "I have been so focused on whether I could trust you, on protecting myself from further hurt, that I failed to acknowledge something important. I still love you. I never stopped loving you, Marcus, even when I was angry and wounded, even when I tried to convince myself that what I felt was merely the remnant of foolish infatuation. I love you, and that terrifies me because love makes one so dreadfully vulnerable." Joy flooded through Marcus so intensely he felt dizzy with it. "Cecilia, let me finish," she said, though she was smiling now, tears glistening in her eyes. "I am choosing to be vulnerable with you. I am choosing to trust that the man I see before me, the one who has shown up every day for weeks, who listens and remembers and shares his own fears, is the real you. Not the man who made that terrible joke, but also not some perfect ideal. Just Marcus, flawed and human and trying his best. That man I can love. That man I do love." Marcus felt his own eyes sting with tears, an unfamiliar sensation for someone who prided himself on emotional control. "You are the bravest person I know," he said roughly. "After everything I did, that you can still—" His voice broke. He tried again. "Thank you for this chance, for your trust, for your love. I will honor all of it, every day for the rest of our lives." "I know you will," Cecilia said simply. Then, with characteristic directness that made him love her even more, "Now are you going to kiss me properly, or must I wait until after the wedding?" Marcus laughed, surprised and delighted, and so full of feeling he could barely contain it. "Here? In Hyde Park, where anyone might see?" "Here," Cecilia confirmed. "Let society see that we are genuinely, ridiculously in love. Let them gossip about the Duke of Blackridge kissing his betrothed with such improper enthusiasm in a public park. I find I no longer care what they think." "Neither do I," Marcus said, and drew her into his arms. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, tender and passionate, tentative and confident, an apology and a promise all at once. Cecilia's arms came up around his neck, her fingers threading through his hair, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. This was right. This was real. This was love, freely given and gratefully received. When they finally parted, both breathing quickly, Cecilia's cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. "Well," she said, a bit breathlessly, "that was rather better than I anticipated." "Only rather," Marcus teased, his own heart racing. "I shall have to practice more extensively to improve my performance." "Extensive practice sounds agreeable," Cecilia agreed, then grew more serious. "Marcus, I want our wedding soon. Not because I fear you will change your mind, but because I do not wish to wait any longer to begin our life together. Can we move the date forward? April, perhaps?" "April," Marcus repeated, happiness expanding in his chest. "Yes, absolutely yes. I will speak with your father immediately about arranging—" "Our wedding," Cecilia interrupted, placing a finger over his lips. "Not my father's wedding or society's wedding, ours. I want something relatively simple and intimate. Just family and close friends. I want to marry you, Marcus, not perform a spectacle for the ton." "Anything you wish," Marcus said, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Though I must warn you, my mother will have opinions about simplicity." "Your mother," Cecilia said thoughtfully, "has been remarkably gracious to me during this whole affair. I suspect she sees more than she admits." "My mother," Marcus said wryly, "is terrifyingly perceptive and has been telling me I am an idiot since I was 7 years old. She undoubtedly recognized my feelings for you long before I did." They resumed walking, hands joined now openly, Cecilia's maid discreetly pretending not to have witnessed the kiss. Marcus felt lighter than he had in months, as though some great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Cecilia loved him. She trusted him. They would marry not out of obligation or social pressure, but because they genuinely wanted to build a life together. "I have a confession," Cecilia said, after they had walked in comfortable silence for a while. "Lord Ashford." Marcus felt a flicker of the old jealousy. "What about him?" "I encouraged his attention deliberately," Cecilia admitted. "Not because I had any interest in him romantically, but because I wanted to see your reaction, to determine whether your jealousy was possessive pride or genuine feeling. I apologize for the manipulation, but I needed to know." Marcus considered feeling offended, then laughed instead. "That is remarkably calculating of you, though I suppose I deserved such testing after my own behavior. What did my jealousy reveal? That you saw me as a person, not a possession," Cecilia said softly. "You were unhappy watching me enjoy Ashford's company, but you never tried to restrict my interactions or demand I limit my attention to you. You trusted my judgment even when it wounded your pride. That told me something important about your character and your regard for me." "I trust you completely," Marcus said honestly. "Even when it is uncomfortable or uncertain, I trust you. That is part of what love means, I think. Believing in someone's autonomy and integrity, even when you wish the circumstances were different." "Yes," Cecilia agreed, "that is exactly what it means. And it is why I know we shall do well together, Marcus. Not because everything will be easy or we shall never disagree. I am certain we shall argue spectacularly about politics and philosophy for decades to come, but because we respect each other fundamentally. We see each other as full, complex human beings worthy of dignity and trust." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing their future, not just the wedding, but the life beyond it. Cecilia expressed her desire to be involved in reform efforts, to use her position as Duchess to advocate for vulnerable children and workers. Marcus shared his own aspirations for his parliamentary work, his hopes of effecting real change through legislation. They spoke of Blackridge Hall, the ducal estate where they would spend much of their time, and how Cecilia might make it truly home. It was remarkable, Marcus reflected, how much more meaningful these conversations were than the debates that had characterized their early friendship. Then they had been performing for each other, showing off their wit and intelligence. Now they were planning genuinely, sharing not just ideas, but hopes and fears, building something real together. The wedding took place on a bright April morning in the chapel at Blackridge Hall. True to Cecilia's wishes, it was an intimate affair, perhaps 50 guests in total, mostly family and close friends. The chapel was decorated simply with spring flowers, daffodils, tulips, and of course lavender. Marcus stood at the altar in his finest coat, his hands remarkably steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Eleanor stood to one side, her smile gentle and knowing. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, looking pleased despite her earlier protestations about the small guest list. Then the music began, and Cecilia appeared at the chapel entrance on her father's arm, and Marcus forgot to breathe. She wore a gown of ivory silk with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline, her dark hair arranged in soft curls with small white roses tucked among them. She carried a simple bouquet of lavender, and carried herself with a grace that seemed to illuminate the chapel. But it was her expression that struck Marcus most powerfully, the joy and certainty in her eyes as she looked at him, the smile that held no reservations or doubts, only happiness. Lord Montfort placed Cecilia's hand in Marcus's with a look that conveyed both blessing and warning. "Care for my daughter. Treat her well. Honor what you have been given." Marcus nodded once, accepting the charge, then turned his attention entirely to the woman beside him. "You are beautiful," he whispered as the vicar began the ceremony. "You are biased," Cecilia whispered back, though her smile widened. "Indisputably," Marcus agreed, "but also correct." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of sacred words and solemn promises. Marcus spoke his vows with complete conviction, meaning every word about love and honor and cherishing Cecilia for all their days. When Cecilia spoke hers, her voice clear and steady, Marcus felt tears prick his eyes again at the magnitude of what she was giving him. Herself, her trust, her future. When the vicar finally pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus pulled Cecilia into his arms and kissed her with all the love and gratitude he felt, heedless of their audience. Applause and laughter erupted around them, but Marcus barely noticed, too focused on the woman in his arms, his wife, his partner, his love. The wedding breakfast that followed was a joyful affair, marked by excellent food, abundant champagne, and numerous toasts. Lord Montfort spoke movingly about his daughter's happiness and his confidence in her future. Eleanor teased Marcus mercilessly about his obvious infatuation. The Dowager Duchess offered advice about managing ducal households that had both Marcus and Cecilia suppressing laughter. But the moment that stayed with Marcus most powerfully came late in the afternoon, after most guests had departed, and he and Cecilia were finally alone in the gardens of Blackridge Hall. They walked together in the spring sunshine, Cecilia's hand tucked into his arm, both of them still in their wedding finery. "Happy?" Marcus asked, though he could see the answer in every line of her face. "Extraordinarily so," Cecilia confirmed. Then, with characteristic honesty, "I never imagined when you made that ridiculous joke at the Hartley dinner that it would lead to this, to real love and genuine partnership. It seemed like such a disaster at the time." "It was a disaster," Marcus said ruefully. "I was an absolute fool." "You were," Cecilia agreed cheerfully. "But you learned from your foolishness. You grew. You changed. That is all any of us can do, Marcus. Recognize our mistakes and endeavor to do better. You have done that remarkably well." "Only because you gave me the chance," Marcus said seriously, stopping to face her fully. "You could have walked away. You could have protected yourself by ending the engagement and never risking your heart with me again. That you chose otherwise. That you chose to trust me despite every reason not to. That is the greatest gift I have ever received." "Well," Cecilia said, her eyes sparkling with humor and affection, "someone had to reform you. You are becoming insufferably arrogant, you know. All that ducal authority going to your head. I considered it my civic duty to take you in hand." Marcus laughed, pulling her close. "Then I am grateful for your sense of civic responsibility. Though I must warn you, I shall require regular reminding not to become insufferable again. It is an ongoing struggle." "I shall be vigilant," Cecilia promised. Then, more softly, "I love you, Marcus. Not despite your flaws, but including them. You are imperfect and occasionally idiotic, and I love you completely." "And I love you," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are brilliant and stubborn, and the best thing that has ever happened to me. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already do," Cecilia said simply. "You show up, you try, you care. That is enough. That is everything." They kissed again, there in the gardens of their home, as the spring afternoon stretched long and golden around them. It was not the ending of their story, Marcus knew, but the beginning, the first page of a life they would write together, marked by debate and laughter and genuine partnership. Later, much later, as evening fell, and they prepared to retire to the ducal apartments that were now their shared sanctuary, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From thoughtless joke to genuine love, from betrayal to trust rebuilt, from friendship to passionate partnership, it had been a long and often painful path. But standing with Cecilia at the window of their chamber, watching the stars emerge over Blackridge Hall, Marcus felt only gratitude. Gratitude for her courage in risking her heart again. Gratitude for his own belated recognition of what truly mattered. Gratitude for the chance to build something real and lasting with the woman he loved. "What are you thinking?" Cecilia asked, leaning against him comfortably. "That I am the most fortunate man in England," Marcus said honestly, "and that I very nearly threw away that fortune through my own stupidity. I shall never take you for granted, Cecilia. Not your love, not your presence, not a single moment we have together." "Good," Cecilia said contentedly. "Though you should know, I have every intention of living to a very old age and arguing with you about politics the entire time. You are quite stuck with me, Your Grace. I can think of no better fate," Marcus said, kissing the top of her head, "except perhaps one thing." "What's that?" "That eventually, not immediately, but eventually, we might have children who inherit your intelligence and passion. I would very much like to watch you be a mother, Cecilia. I think you would be magnificent at it." Cecilia turned in his arms, her expression soft. "And I think you would be an excellent father. Not perfect, certainly, but present and caring and willing to learn. Yes, children, eventually, but for now." She smiled up at him with an expression that made his heart race. "For now, I would like to simply be your wife. Is that agreeable?" "Entirely agreeable," Marcus said, and drew her close, grateful beyond words for this woman, this love, this life they would build together. 2 years later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Blackridge nursery, illuminating a scene of domestic chaos and contentment. Marcus sat on the floor, something that would have horrified him 2 years ago, watching his wife attempt to coax their 11-month-old son, Thomas, to take his first steps. "Come on, darling," Cecilia encouraged, holding out her hands. "Come to Mama. Just a few steps." Thomas, who had inherited his mother's dark hair and his father's brown eyes, regarded her seriously for a moment, then promptly sat down with a decisive thump and began examining his toes instead. "I believe our son has inherited your stubborn nature," Marcus observed, trying not to laugh at Cecilia's exasperated expression. "My stubborn nature." Cecilia turned to give him a look of mock outrage. "He is absolutely your son, Marcus. That expression he just made, that is your I shall do things in my own time, thank you face." "I have no such face," Marcus protested, even as he recognized the truth in her words. Thomas was indeed a perfect combination of both of them, Cecilia's intensity and his own determination, her warmth and his reserve, her intelligence and his logic. "You absolutely do," Cecilia insisted, abandoning her attempts to make Thomas walk in favor of scooping him up for a kiss. "You make it whenever I suggest you should perhaps attend fewer parliamentary sessions and more social events, or whenever Eleanor tells you that your latest speech was too long, or whenever—" "I concede the point," Marcus interrupted, rising from the floor to join them. He looked at his son, an astonishment that still struck him daily, and felt the same overwhelming love he had experienced the moment Thomas was born. "Though I must say, if he has inherited our combined stubbornness, heaven help his future tutors." "And his future wife," Cecilia added with a grin. "Speaking of which, I received a letter from your mother this morning. She is already making subtle inquiries about potential matches for Thomas." "He is not yet a year old," Marcus said, aghast. "I am aware. I told her that we would not be entertaining such discussions until Thomas is at least 3. Cecilia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "She was most put out by my lack of maternal ambition." Marcus laughed, pulling both wife and son into his arms. "You are a terrible daughter-in-law." "I am an excellent daughter-in-law," Cecilia corrected. "I simply refuse to allow your mother to arrange Thomas's entire life before he can even walk. We shall let him choose his own path, make his own mistakes, find his own way, just as we did." "Even if that path leads him to propose to someone as a joke at a dinner party?" Marcus asked wryly. "Even then," Cecilia confirmed. "Though I shall certainly counsel him about clarity in courtship. Perhaps we can spare him some of our more dramatic moments." They stood together in the nursery, sunlight warming them, their son babbling contentedly between them. It was so far from the life Marcus had imagined for himself 2 years ago, the careful, controlled existence he had planned, free from emotional complications or messy entanglements. But it was infinitely better. "I love you," he said quietly, the words still carrying weight despite how often he now spoke them. "Both of you, more than I ever imagined possible." "I love you too," Cecilia replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Even when you are being insufferable, which is still rather frequently." "I shall endeavor to be less insufferable," Marcus promised. "Please don't," Cecilia said, smiling against his lips. "I have grown quite fond of your particular brand of insufferability. It keeps life interesting." Thomas chose that moment to grab both their faces, making a sound of imperious demand that suggested he felt he was being neglected. They laughed together, turning their attention to their son, marveling at this small person they had created, this manifestation of their love. Later, after the nurse had taken Thomas for his nap, and Marcus and Cecilia had retreated to the library for their customary afternoon tea, they resumed the political debate they had been conducting for the past week about proposed education reforms. Their voices rose and fell in familiar patterns, argument and counter-argument, passion and logic, the intellectual dance that had first drawn them together. "You are being deliberately obtuse," Cecilia accused, though her eyes were bright with enjoyment. "I am being realistic," Marcus countered. "Your idealism, while admirable, does not account for the practical difficulties of implementation." "Your realism is simply cynicism dressed in pragmatic clothing," Cecilia shot back. They continued in this vein for another hour, thoroughly enjoying themselves, until Cecilia suddenly paused mid-argument and said, "Do you remember when we first met? That tea where I was debating Lord Thornbury?" "Of course," Marcus said. "You demolished his argument so thoroughly that he avoided you at social functions for months afterward." "I was terribly nervous," Cecilia confessed. "I knew you were watching, and I so wanted to impress you. Even then I think I was a little bit in love with you, though I would never have admitted it." Marcus felt his heart constrict with tenderness. "And I was captivated. I told myself it was merely intellectual appreciation. But Eleanor claims she knew even then that I was lying to myself about my feelings. Eleanor is insufferably perceptive, Cecilia agreed, though I suppose we should be grateful for her interference. If she had not forced you to confront your feelings after that disastrous confession, you might have let pride keep us apart. True, Marcus acknowledged. He crossed to where Cecilia sat, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. I was a fool about many things back then. I'm trying very hard not to be a fool anymore. You are succeeding admirably, Cecilia assured him, though I do have one complaint about our current arrangement. What's that? We have been married for 2 years and I still win the majority of our debates. You really must improve your argumentation skills, Your Grace. I'm beginning to suspect you sometimes concede points simply to please me. Marcus laughed, delighted as always by her competitive nature. Guilty as charged. Though in my defense, watching you celebrate your victories with such enthusiasm is its own reward. Flattery, Cecilia accused, but she was smiling. Very well. I shall accept your inferior debating skills as evidence of your devotion, but I draw the line at you pretending to lose at chess. That is simply insulting to us both. I have never pretended to lose at chess, Marcus said indignantly. You are genuinely better at it than I am. I know, Cecilia said smugly. I just wanted to hear you admit it. They spent the rest of the afternoon in comfortable companionship, reading and talking, and simply being together. This, Marcus reflected, was what he had almost lost through his own carelessness. Not just Cecilia's love, but her friendship, her presence, the simple joy of sharing life with someone who understood and challenged and cherished him. As evening fell and they prepared to dress for dinner, a small gathering of close friends they were hosting, Marcus caught Cecilia's reflection in the mirror and was struck anew by his extraordinary fortune. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was herself, brilliant and passionate and uncompromising, and his. What? Cecilia asked, noticing his stare. Nothing, Marcus said, though it was everything. I was simply thinking how grateful I am for that ridiculous joke at the Hartley dinner, for the disaster that became the best thing that ever happened to me. Cecilia's expression softened. She came to stand beside him, taking his hand. Then I am grateful for it too. For the joke, for the misunderstanding, for the pain that forced us both to confront what we truly felt. All of it led us here, Marcus, to this life, this love, this family we are building together. Yes, Marcus agreed simply. All of it led us here. And standing together in the soft light of evening, hands joined and hearts aligned, they moved forward into their future. Not perfect, never perfect, but genuine and hard-won and entirely their own. The end. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If you felt your heart race, break and mend again, with Marcus and Cecilia's journey from misunderstanding to true love, you're not alone. We invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video to support our storytelling family. From the bottom of our hearts, your support inspires us to keep bringing you more original love stories, full of passion, redemption, and emotional depth. At the end of this video, we suggest another tale from our channel. Click and let yourself be surprised by more powerful stories just like this one. With love, The Legends of the Fall Team.